Here we are with another of our casual discussions of historians who are doing interesting and important work, and I'm thrilled to welcome my friend and colleague Jon Wiener to chat with us about a brand new and I think exceedingly important book. So Jon, thank you for your time. Tell us.
Honored, a pleasure, an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful. So the book we're talking about is the co-authored book that Jon just published with Mike Davis called Set the Night on Fire, LA in the 60s. Having read the book closely, I can attest to its really powerful feeling, tone, research, argumentative style, and also just how compelling it is through the human drama of, in particular, young people, which we'll get to in a minute. But Jon, just tell us a little bit about your own background and maybe about your friendship and partnership with Mike in this and I know other projects as well.
Well, as you can see, I'm an old white man. There's a secret in my past, which I will share with you, Bill, if you promise not to tell.
Well, you are on
anybody else, and that is,
okay.
I don't have,
yeah,
I do not have a PhD in history. My PhD is from Harvard, but it's in government. I did a lot of history. I always wrote about history. I always got jobs in the history department, but you know, I got to tell the truth.
Yeah.
I taught at UC Irvine for 40 years, driving up and down the 405. I'm very glad I'm not doing that anymore. I've done a lot of work as a journalist over the last 20 or 30 years. I'm a contributing editor to The Nation magazine and host of their weekly podcast, Start Making Sense. And I've known Mike. I met Mike pretty much as soon as I arrived here in LA, which was in 1969. He was a lead SDS organizer. I was a movement person writing for the underground press. And, you know, kept track of him, was friends with him. And then about 5 years ago, he asked if I would co-author this book about that he had in mind for over a decade about LA in the 60s. I had been waiting for him to write this book. So I was a little surprised that that he wanted me to join him, but I was thrilled to do it. So we divided up the work. The sort of the backbone of the book is Mike's narrative of Black and Chicano organizing and movement activity from 1960 to 1973. And then around that are swirling all of the other movements, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, the draft resistance movement, the gay liberation movement, the free clinic movement, the counterculture, the underground press. And my responsibility was to write the drafts of all those chapters. So I sort of got to do the kind of the fun parts, and he got to do the kind of the serious center of the book. And I know in your review you said it was choppy in parts. Well, I think you've found the secret of co-authored books. When you try to cover a lot of different things and you have two different people, you know, that's what happened.
Sure. So I think I have my own personal memories of chatting with Mike years ago where this book was in his head. What was it about that idea that either Mike just now recently got around to it and asking you to add co-authorship to it, or did it have to stew for a while, and do we have to get some distance from the 70s, you think, to have this historical take on it?
Well, what got him started on this was he wrote a beautiful essay on the Sunset Strip riots, which appeared, you are probably one of the only people who know the journal where it appeared. It appeared in a Canadian binational bilingual labor history journal called Labor Le Travail. He went around town giving the paper. You probably heard it. I heard it. And it was beautifully written. He was very interested in young people in the streets, basically. He had been part of this history, of course. I mean, this was his life. mine too. Mike has a lot of projects. I think at the time that he asked me to join him on this, he was trying to finish 3 other books. And that's one reason why he wanted help on this one, because it was going to have to be a big one. So partly it's just the energy and the political commitments and the life of Mike Davis, and the sense that, well, I think we better do this now, because the people who we wanted to interview, some of them have died, some of them can't remember the era anymore. Now's the time to do this.
Yeah, I think one of the aspects of the book that I like the most is we oftentimes look at the 60s, and there is a kind of gap. I mean, there are books on the 60s of LA, there's certainly books on Watts, etc. But it is a decade that needs this kind of really thick and deeply researched scholarship. So what I like so much about the book too, though, is you all don't deal with these episodes or ruptures as little volcanic points. You've got the whole spread there of carrying people from moment to moment and through the 60s. And so it reads not maybe choppy just because it has so many chapters, but it doesn't read episodically. It reads like an entire arc of the decade. Is that something you deliberately tried to do?
I'm very glad to hear that. Of course, there were many different movements, but they did have many common points, some more dramatic than others. Women's Strike for Peace, which started as a ban the bomb group in 1961, was organized by a remarkable woman named Mary Clark. I mean, this is sort of early anti-war, early feminist activism, although I don't think they explicitly called themselves feminists, but it turns out it was in Mary Clark's living room that Mike started organizing SDS. She provided a meeting space for the kids. The Sunset Strip riots ended up endorsing Free Huey, the Black Panther leader, and coincided with the first street protest in America by gay activists protesting against the police raid on a gay bar. That happened in LA, the Black Cat bar, 2 years before Stonewall. So there's all of these overlapping connecting points. And of course, the real thing that connected everybody was that they were all harassed, attacked, arrested by the LAPD, which is kind of a constant in all 37 chapters.
Yeah, exactly right. So are there aspects of the either individual chapters or some of the personalities and heroes of the book that were new to you? Or is it mostly a kind of familiar story that you all then went and researched?
The biggest surprise to me was Mike's discoveries. I think he was he didn't quite appreciate how important this would turn out to be either, with how young a lot of the people in the streets were. The Black movement, the Chicano movement, so a lot of high school kids, even junior high school kids, really remarkable. And I always thought of, SDS is a college organization and the campuses are the center of radicalism in America. Well, Mike shows pretty clearly, Garfield High, junior highs that had walkouts and blowouts. That to me was, I'd say, the biggest single surprise of the book.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things the two of you could be most proud of. I think just to uncover that generation of very young kids. And in doing so, in terms of radicalism, civil rights, and human rights activism in 60s California, you've recentered our vision from People's Park and Sproul Plaza in Berkeley down to junior high school kids in LA. It's a really remarkable thing.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing, I sort of knew about this in the back of my mind, but, we always think about the anti-war movement was centered on the big college campuses, Berkeley, Michigan, Wisconsin, Columbia. That was not true here in LA. LA is an exception. USC, of course, was a fraternity boy football paradise in the 60s. UCLA was nowhere near as active as the state colleges and the junior colleges, and the biggest number of arrests anywhere in Southern California at a student anti-war protest was at Valley State, which is now Cal State Northridge. It was a brand new campus at the far western end of the San Fernando Valley. Very unlikely place to have hundreds of people arrested, building occupations, and extremely surprising that the district attorney of Los Angeles, Evel Younger, brought 1,730 felony charges against 24 Black student union leaders from Valley State after they occupied the president's office. It's the largest felony indictment and felony trials of student radicals anywhere in the United States. I don't think anybody much knew about this unless you had been at Valley State in 1968 and 1969.
Yeah, no, it's again this kind of brilliant recentering, because activism in LA, as you say, you're not going to think about the western edge of the San Fernando Valley and a small, actually a big college, but small compared to some of the giants of the radical movement. So I love those chapters about the Valley State kids and some faculty leadership they had there, and I'm sure the reverberations continue. That's something I want to talk to you about a little bit. So the book now, basically ends in the early 70s. Tell us about your sense of continuities between that period unto today. I mean, obviously there's clear connections and comparisons, but what about continuities that actually cross through that entire 50-year period from then to now?
Well, we've seen one of Mike's big themes is the radical moves of the 60s were defeated. We didn't get community control of the police. We got a Black mayor, but he ended up being a kind of a downtown business development liberal Democrat rather than grassroots, advocate Black mayor, Tom Bradley. We didn't get women's liberation. We got gay marriage and careers and jobs open to women, and so on. However, in the last year or two, and of course in the last month or two, we've seen a tremendous rebirth, much bigger, and in many ways much better than anything that happened in the 60s. I mean, when we finished our book as the LA teacher strike was going. This is so much better than the teacher strike and the student struggles of the late 60s. In the late 60s, the teachers were against the students. The teachers were racist. They wanted to kick the students out. They were calling the police. In the teacher strike of 2 years ago, the teachers were on the picket line with the students and the families. And of course, they're young people of color, a lot of the teachers union members, children and grandchildren of activists from the 60s. And what we've seen in the last couple of months of Black Lives Matter struggle is miles ahead of anything that the Black Panthers or Ron Karenga's US or CORE or SNCC was able to organize in the 60s. Much more diverse, much more huge, much more focused, much more successful in winning support. I mean, the mayor saying he wants to cut $150 or $200 million from the police budget, it's not what Black Lives Matter wants. But compared to the 60s, when the police were killing the activists of the Black Panther Party, we're living in a much better time than the 1960s right now.
It's fascinating. I mean, I think, have you found, the book's just recently out, but have you found that some of the leadership of current movements and current protest activities have reached to the book to get some context and perhaps even some inspiration?
Well, of course, this is our dream, and we're doing what we can to get it out. We're doing an event with DSA on Monday. They've gotten into this. Jacobin Magazine has done a lot on this. The left-wing press is very engaged and committed. The activists, like activists everywhere, they're more concerned with activism than with the reading up on, what happened 40 or 50 years ago. So we want them to,
Yeah. Well, you know, John,
We hope they will. 600 pages, you know, it's hard to get, I mean, you're one of the few people who's probably read every one of the 640 pages. You've probably even read some of the footnotes.
Yes, I did, much to my enjoyment and to my learning. But you're actually in a very special place here to be able to answer this question. So what do you suspect the reaction will be from, let's say, the East Coast left, and about LA as this vibrant, hugely important place in the 1960s? And have you begun to hear some reactions from East Coast intelligentsia, activists, etc.?
Well, our entry to the East Coast, I think, is City of Quartz. A lot of people everywhere in America, all around the English-speaking world, read and loved and still think about City of Quartz. So this sort of opens the door to thinking of LA as, you know, an important and an interesting place. But City of Quartz, I'm sure you remember, I've taught this book, you know, a dozen times. It's not about the people fighting the man, you know, it's not about what's happening in the streets. It's about the power structures and about the imagination of Los Angeles in the minds of writers, publicists, developers, and so on. So, you know, this is kind of the other side of Mike Davis's LA, and I think that element commands attention, and it's something people have been looking for. You know,
Yes.
I think I must have heard it, you know, a dozen times with graduate students saying, well, where are the people? Where's the working class when they're reading City of Quartz? Well, here they are.
Right, and I see over your right shoulder there that City of Quartz and Set the Night on Fire are right next to each other, and they are companion books, no question. And I'm with you. I was one of those people when Mike was off writing world histories about famine and collapse, etc. I was one of those people that said, great, wonderful, but come on, we need another LA book from you. You know, we went from City of Quartz to Ecology of Fear, and this one is a companion, a child of, in a sense, but also it has the feel, and maybe that's because of your friendship with Mike, it has the feel of a book, a love affair book, of a period and a kind of lifting up these really heroic young people.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Hold on.
That's okay.
I'm gonna forgot to turn off my phone.
That's okay.
Can we pause for a minute while I turn this off?
Yeah, of course.
The phone.
So, John, I have to ask: are the two of you contemplating other projects together?
Mike has moved on to coronavirus. Mike, you know, you may know that 10 or 12 years ago, Mike wrote a book about the avian flu. He's been interested in virus pandemics for a long time. This is the other side of Mike Davis. He reads, you know, he stays up late at night reading virology textbooks to learn everything he can. And he's been writing about COVID-19, the science of it, as well as the politics of it. So that is where his passions and energy are right now. You know, we do feel, although the book is 800 pages long, it's way too long. It's twice as long as the contract specified. They'd spend a while trying to decide whether to do it as two separate volumes, you know, slipcased and all of that. We're very much aware of all the things we left out of it, and we're feeling terrible about that. But, you know, so in some sense, it's too short. But I don't think right now we're gonna return to the missing of this story. We've, you know, the world has changed, and you know, we got new problems.
Yeah. Well, I just congratulate you both. I just it's a very important book for those of us that study not only this region but the world of young people. I mean, it's a real contribution to the courage of teenagers. You know, and I really celebrate that, and also their willingness to challenge, but also I think in a sense the way they felt encouraged by something in LA culture to express themselves and to express themselves in the streets. And I just hope that spirit continues. And as I said in the review, you know, in a sense, these really are the grandparents of the current heroes. who are our junior high and high school activists.
Thank you, and I think you're right.
Yeah, well, thanks, John. I appreciate it. And best of luck with the book getting out there and getting read and taught and continuing to inspire folks.
Bill, it's great having you as a reader, and it's great getting to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Great. Of course, John. Thank you.